Hello everyone, welcome to my kitchen. My name is Michael and I've got a few extra pears here that are getting really ripe, and before they go bad I thought I would do something with them. So I'm going to make some pear sauce, or if you want to make some natural baby food using the pears, you can definitely do that. And I've got my slow cooker here. This is late at night and getting ready to go to bed. So I thought I would put my slow cooker on and cook these overnight. So when I get up in the morning, I've got these ready to go. But definitely if you wanted to do this during the day, you can. And that way you can kind of stir them around if you want to. And so we're going to get started with that. There's a couple of ways we can peel these. These are really ripe, and I might have to transition to where I can blanch them, but we're going to see. I've got a vegetable peeler here. I'm going to try that. If that doesn't work and they're really too overripe, then I'm going to go and get my water and heat that up and go ahead and blanch these. So we'll take a look at that in just a minute and see how this is going to work. All right, so I'm going to go ahead and try to peel these with my vegetable peeler. I'm going to go ahead and take the top off of these and the bottom. If you want to save these for your compost pile, you can definitely do that. If you want to save this and make some vinegar, I've got a recipe on my channel where I made some homemade vinegar. I'll put that link in the description box below. Go check that out if you're interested to see how vinegar is made. It's really easy to make, and just a little bit of time and the scraps that you've got of some of your fruits, you can definitely make some vinegar. So either way you want to do that, that's a good way to use these up. All right, so now that I've got the top and the bottom cut off of it, let's take this vegetable peeler. I think this is going to work very well. And so there is a way to do that though if you are having a hard time with the skins on these. If you want to peel them, you definitely can. If you don't want to, you don't have to. These are so thin that they'll probably just cook down into your mixture that you've got. So what you do with that is you take boiling water, and then you take your pears and you want to drop them in there no more than 15 to 30 seconds, because these skins on these are not very thick at all. It's not going to take long for those to do that, and you risk the chance of starting to cook the pears, and you definitely don't want to do that. So take them, put them in some hot water and let them sit there, and then take them out and then put them in a cold ice bath, and then you can take your hands and just rub against the skin, and if it comes off on your hand, you know it's been in there long enough. And it hasn't, you can go back in and put it in there for another 15 seconds or so. But definitely keep a watch on pears, because they do have a tendency to start cooking because the skins on these are so thin. All right, so I've got the first one cut up here. Now we're just going to take it and I'm just going to cut it down the middle. And then I've got one of these little coring tools here that I use on my strawberries, and you can take that and just cut that insert right out of that area. That's really good for that. And I'll do the same thing for the other one here. There's also a little vein that runs up through there like that. So you can take the knife and just cut it down on both sides, and that will just pop right out of there just like that. And I'm gonna do the same thing with this one over here. Sometimes when you cut them like that, it'll just pop right out. All right, so now what we're gonna do is I'm just gonna cut these into smaller pieces, because I do want this to break down fairly quickly. If you cut these into uniform pieces, they'll break down a lot easier with that. So definitely you can cut them how you want to. I'm going to go ahead and put those in there like that. If it's going to be a while, if you've got a lot of these, put you some water in there with some lemon juice, and that way they won't start turning brown. They have a tendency to do that just like apples do. So if you're going to get this done pretty quickly, then definitely you don't have to do that. I'm going to go ahead and grab some water and some lemon juice and put it in mine, because I don't want these turning brown before I get all these cut up. All right, I've got 500 milliliters of water, or that's about 2 cups, and I've got bottled lemon juice. I'm going to be canning these when these are done. So I'm probably just going to put maybe a teaspoon in that, just kind of eyeball that. And then I'm going to put that over my pears here. It's not going to really affect the taste of those, because once we're done cutting these up, I'm going to pour this water off anyway. So I'm going to continue to cut these up, and I'll be right back. I've got all my pears cut up now, and I'm going to go to the sink and I'm going to put my lid on this and just drain this water off that, because we don't really need that for this next process. So I'll be right back in just a second. All right, I've got the water and the lemon juice drained off of that. So like I said, it really keeps the pears from turning brown, because they will oxidize fairly quickly, and it won't affect the taste of it at all. You won't even know that it's on there. All right, so let's go ahead and turn our slow cooker on, and I'm going to put this on low, and I just want that to cook like that. And that'll set for 6 hours, and I'm going to put the lid on it and just leave it alone. If you're doing this during the day and you want to come in a couple hours and stir it around, you can do that. With these slow cookers, if you take the lid off of it, that steam that comes out of there will have to build back up again. So it's best just to leave it alone, and you'll be able to tell by looking at it when it starts cooking down and these start breaking down. So I'll come back, let you know how long these took to cook, and this is set for 6 hours right now. We'll see how long it takes. I'll be right back. All right, let's check on our pears now. We have been at 10 hours now on these. So definitely if you wanted to put these on in the morning before you went to work, you could do that and let these cook all day. Let's take a look at these and see what we have here. So I've got a fork. Actually, let's take a spatula and just kind of give this a stir around. You can see what they look like here. I've got some nice syrup in the bottom of those, which is going to be really nice. And let's check it with a fork. I've got a clean fork here. And what we're looking at now is just to see it's fork tender, they're falling apart. So these are done. All right, so now at this point, we want to taste these to see what these taste like. If you want them natural, you can definitely leave them like this. You don't have to put any sugar in them if you don't want to. If you're making baby food, definitely. It's up to you at this point. If you want to just leave them like this, you can. So now I want to give mine a taste test and see what these taste like. I'm just going to grab a couple of these up and try them and see what we've got here. So these are still really hot. Definitely don't want to burn yourself with these. Those are falling apart in my mouth. They're done. I'm going to put a little bit of sugar in those to kind of sweeten those up a little bit. And at this point, your imagination can go wild with it. I've got several videos on my channel where I cooked pears and made cakes and things with them. Definitely, you can try different things in them. I've got some cinnamon here today that I'm going to be putting in mine. You can use cardamom. Cardamom is real good with it. I've got a video on my channel where I made a cardamom and pear cake. It was really good. And so definitely you can use cinnamon in your pears. And I've got a half a cup of sugar. If you wanted to use brown sugar, you could definitely do that. It'll add that extra little bit of molasses to it that's in the brown sugar. So this is a half a cup. And I'm going to start out with that and put that in. And then I'm going to take my spatula and just kind of give that a good mix around. And I'm going to leave this on the heat here just so that that can kind of cook into it and see what that's going to taste like. I've got some cinnamon and I'm just going to sprinkle that over the top of it. This isn't a real recipe at this point. This is you, how you think you might like yours. And I'm just going to kind of sprinkle that over the top of it. That might be a teaspoon. I definitely don't want to get too much in there because you can always add more at the table. If you put too much in there, initially you might get them so, it might turn bitter on you with the cinnamon in there. So definitely be on the sparing side of that until you can give it a taste to see what it's going to taste like. Now I'm going to let these heat up a little bit more and see if I need to add anything else to them, and that'll kind of get that sugar to dissolve in there. So just a few more minutes. So once you get your pears sweetened to the way you like them, or if you're going to use cinnamon or cardamom, whatever you're going to put in them, or you just leave them plain, however you like them. I'm going to be water bath canning these today, so I'm going to show you that process of how to do that because this is a lot for me to try to eat. So definitely by water bath canning, I can make these shelf stable. And doing so, I've got 2 tablespoons of lemon juice here, and I'm going to put that in, and we're going to add that to it. And the lemon juice that I added in there is bottled juice. When you're canning, always make sure that you use the lemon juice that's in the bottles from the store that's commercially made instead of squeezing it, because they control the acidity level of the lemons in that juice that you get in the stores versus what you can squeeze from the actual fresh lemons themselves, because you can go from lemon to lemon and the acidity level will change. So definitely add the bottled lemon juice when you get ready to process your pears. I'm going to let this sit and then I'll come back and give it another taste test and see if I need to add any more sugar to it, and might need to add a little bit more cinnamon to it. We'll see what it tastes like. And while that's sitting there warming up, I'm going to go ahead and get my canning supplies out. This is my water bath canner here. And if you've not seen any of my videos on my channel, I've got several on there. I've got a basic beginner's guide on how to water bath can. And definitely with your water bath canner, you want to make sure that it's got some type of rack in it, because when you put your jars in there, you don't want the jars sitting flat against the bottom of it, because if they start banging around when it starts boiling, they might take a chance of breaking those. So make sure you've got a rack in it of your canner that you've got. And so what we're going to do is I'm going to be putting these in pint jars today. And I've put them through the dishwasher. I've got them in the dishwasher now to get those sterilized and clean. We want everything to be as clean as we can possibly get. And then what we're going to do is we're going to take our jars, and I'm going to fill each individual jar with water inside the bottom of the canner before I put any water in it at all. And that way, that weighs the jar down. And that way, when it gets filled up, it'll overflow into the canner, and we'll put them in there like that. I'm going to go ahead and put 4 of my pint-sized jars in my canner. Fill that up. You want that to be 1 to 2 inches of water above the top of the jar. While this is now settling in with the sugar, I'm going to go ahead and get my jars out of the dishwasher, put those in here, fill them up with water, and definitely check them now for your seasoning, your sugar, cinnamon, cardamom, whatever you want to put in it. And I'll meet you back here and we'll start processing our pears into the jars. All right, I've got my water bath counter now on the stove. I've got it filled full of water, and that was 1 inch to 2 inches above the top of the jars. I want to go ahead and give my pears another taste now. I've got another clean spoon here that I'm going to pull some out, because definitely we want to make sure that we keep everything as clean as we possibly can get. And I wanted to tell you about the lemon juice that I had. The reason that I use 2 tablespoons is my formula is for every 3 pounds of fresh fruit that I've got, I put 1 tablespoon in. So that's why I put 2 tablespoons in, because I had 6 pounds of pears, close to 6 pounds of pears when I did that. So now we're going to check to see if we need any more sugar. I think it could use another 1/2 cup. So I'm going to grab another 1/2 cup. I'm going to put just a little bit more cinnamon in it, not much more. And we're going to come back, and I'm going to show you next what we're going to do. I've got my mixture where I want it now, so I wound up putting 1 cup of sugar in there, and I just lightly dusted the top again with more cinnamon on it, and I got it where I like it, right where it's at right now. So now, because these are just falling apart, this is not going to take much to do these. I've got an immersion blender that I'm going to be using, and I want to kind of break this down a little bit more. If you want to put this into a blender, if you've got a glass bowl blender, you can definitely do that. The blender that I've got has a plastic bowl on it, and I definitely don't want to use that because I don't want to melt it, because these are still really hot. If you've got a potato masher, you can use one of those. If you like the consistencies where it's at right now, definitely leave it like this. It's completely up to you. I'm going to scoop out several scoops of this, put this into a bowl, use my immersion blender on it. My slow cooker has a non-stick finish in it. I definitely don't want to use the immersion blender I've got, because it is metal and I don't want to scratch the bottom of that. That's why I'm going to take some of it out. But if you've got a traditional slow cooker that maybe has a porcelain or an earthenware bowl in it, definitely. If you've got that, you know what equipment you have, use your discretion on that. I'm going to pull some of this out, put this in this bowl, use an immersion blender, and just kind of break it up a little bit more. I do have my jars on the stove, and they are heating up. We want to make sure that our jars are about 180 degrees. That's about where our pears are now with that. When you're preserving food like that, you definitely don't want to put hot food in cold jars, because it could potentially break the jar, and we definitely don't want that to happen. So by doing that, we'll make it a little bit safer and put that warm or hot food into a warm or hot jar. So I'm just going to put my immersion blender here and just push it in and just break this up just a little bit. All right, I've got my pear sauce now broken down really nicely, so I'm going to add that back to my mixture. I did leave some chunks of the other pieces in there. Definitely, if you want it completely smooth, then take all of it out and put it in there and completely break that down. Let's give that another stir around and see what we've got. I'm definitely liking what I see there, but typically your sauce that you get in the stores is going to be completely broken down. But you know, leave it the way you like it. If you like a little bit of chunks in it, then definitely do it that way. So let's get this all mixed together. And I'm going to plug this back in on low just to keep it warm. And then I'm going to wait for my jars to heat up, and we'll start the process of our water bath canning. I'm ready to start filling up the jars with my pears. So I'm going to take the lid off of here, and we'll go through some of the equipment. Like I said, I'll put the link in the description box below for my basic canning techniques if you've never canned before. This is really easy. This is a jar lifter. You definitely want something that's got some kind of a lift that you can grab a hold of the jar with. You definitely don't want to use a pair of tongs. The tongs, if you grab a jar, could slip out of the hand. It could slip out of that. We want to make sure that we're really safe with our jars, because you don't want to drop something on yourself and burn you, because the jars are going to be hot, the food's going to be hot. Definitely use something that's designated for canning, and this is one of these. This is a jar lifter for that. I've got a funnel here. I've got my debulber on this end, and I've got my measuring guide on this end. With today's measurements, we want a 1/2 inch headspace across the top, and each one of these markings on this tool is a 1/4 inch. So when I put the tool down on the jar, I'll be able to tell when the bottom of this touches the food that I'm a 1/2 inch of headspace that I need. Then I've got my metal lifter here for my lids. I've got my lids washed. I've got some water here. I'm going to go ahead and put my lids in the water, and I'm going to put those on the stove just to warm up just a little bit. Back when I was younger and my mom was teaching me how to do that, we used to boil the lids, but they don't do that anymore. The USDA says we don't have to do that anymore, so we're just going to put that in there just to warm the water up just a little bit, and to make sure that those get a good chance for sealing on that. And then I got my rings. You don't have to heat the rings up with your rings. Make sure you've got good rings. These are new. If you want to use your rings again, you can use these again. With the lids, you do not reuse those again if you're going to make any more processing of food. But you can use the rings again as long as they're really good. If I see rust on these, I throw them out. These are so cheap, you can get new ones, and it's not too bad. I've got some white vinegar here, and I've got a paper towel. I'll show you what we'll do with that in just a minute. And so I'm ready to go grab a jar, and we'll get started. All right, I've got my jar now, and I'm going to go ahead and put my funnel on the top because we want to make sure that we get all of that in there and it doesn't wind up on our countertop. I'm going to give this another good stir around so to get that all mixed up. Now I'm going to take this and fill this jar until we get a 1/2 inch headspace at the top. All right, I've got my jar filled up now. I'm going to take my debubbler, which is this side here. If you've got a chopstick, you can use that. Definitely use whatever you've got. And you want to go in and just make sure there's no air pockets in there, because what you don't want to happen, if there's an air pocket in the bottom, it could change the distance that you've got for your 1/2 inch of your headspace here. So definitely that's what that's for. Let's take a look at that and see. I need to add just a little bit more of my pear sauce. It's not going to take much to bring that up. So now we are at a 1/2 inch headspace on those. All right, now that we've got that done, I'm going to take my clean paper towel that I've got here and my white vinegar that I've got, and I want to make sure I clean off the top of that jar. What we want to happen is we want to have a good seal. If there's any of that sticky pear sauce on the top, it could prevent the lid from sealing. We definitely don't want that to happen. That's why the process that we're going through to do that. So now we're going to get a metal holder here that I've got. That way I don't have to touch my lids that I've got. And I do have those heated up. And those are just barely just heated up just a little bit above room temperature. Take one of my rings and I'm going to grab a hold of this jar because I know that it's still really hot. And you want these fingertip tight. And what that means is once you get the band on it and it stops, give it one little twist and that's fingertip tight. The reason we don't want to really tighten that down is we want that air to escape out of there, and that's what the canning process is going to do. It's going to pull all that air out and allow that to seal on its own, and that's how that really works. So I'm going to take my can lifter that I've got here, my jar lifter that I've got, and I'm going to put that back in my canner and go grab another jar, and we'll see how many we get out of here. I believe this is going to be my last one. Let's take a measurement now to see what we have. I've got a 1/2 inch on that one. We're going to clean this one up. And the reason also we're cleaning it is just to make sure that none of our jars have a crack on them or chipped on the top. This is one last check that you can do to make sure that you've got good jars for your processing. We'll take our last lid there, our last band. Fingertip tight. And with that, I've got 3 jars that I got out of there. You can see what I've got left here. It's just a little bit we've got left over. I'm going to put that in a bowl and we'll give that a taste in just a minute. Now I'm going to put this back in the canner and I'll come back and explain the processing time. I've got my last jar now in my canner, and I did get 3 pint-sized jars out of that with this little bit left over here. So now with that, I've got my canner up on high and I want to bring the water up to a boil. I've got the lid on it to make sure that that's going to happen. And so with water bath canning, you want to make sure you get a good rolling boil, not just where you see a little bit of bubbles. You want it boiling, boiling, boiling. After the water comes into a rolling boil, we're going to process the jars for 20 minutes with the lid on it. Once the 20-minute timer goes off, you'll take the lid off the water bath canner, turn the heat source off, and you're going to let the jars sit in the canner for 5 minutes, and they'll continue to, you'll see little bubbles coming out of them. Sometimes you'll see that coming out of there. And then we'll pull that out. Now that time is for pint jars. If you've got quart jars, if you've got a lot of these that you're going to make, you can process those for 25 minutes. And that's based on altitude. Where I live is just below 1,000 feet. So that is the time that we use for that. So if your altitude where you are is below 1,000 feet, then your pints will be 20 minutes, your quarts will be 25. I'll put the link in the description box below because it goes up incrementally per 1,000 feet. It'll add a little bit of time to your processing time. So you need to know where you live, the altitude where you're at, and then you can take that and use that time to process your food. So mine is 20 minutes for pints, 25 for quarts, out of below 1,000 feet. Once those are done, I'll come back and show you what we're going to do after that. I am back and my pear sauce is done. I'm just pulling it out of the canner, and I wanted to show you what that looks like. We've got 3 nice jars that have processed really nicely. If you've never canned before, on these type of jar lids, on these balls, there's a little dimple on the top of it that'll be raised up when it's not processed, and when it gets processed, it'll pop down into it. And you'll be able to hear sometimes too the little audible sound when they make it go ping as it pops down into it. So when you pick these up out of the canner, you want to make sure you just pick them straight up. You don't want to be turning and twisting them. Straight up and down, put them down where they sit. That way they can settle into their jar and be processed nicely. There might be a little bit of water on the top that'll evaporate off. I would not worry about trying to dump that off of it. The heat from the lid and the contents will evaporate all the water off the top of it. We want to let this sit now for 24 hours and to put this somewhere where somebody's not going to be touching them, because this is still really hot. Like I said, it's been boiling for 20 minutes and you definitely don't want anybody to get hurt. So put these somewhere so nobody's going to touch them. We want to allow these to cool down. When these cool down, the little rings on the outside of the jars will get loose. At that point, you'll take the rings off of the jars, and that way you'll be able to test it to see whether or not you've got a good seal on it. I went and grabbed one of my applesauce jars and what I was talking about with that. So when you take the ring off the top, you'll have this left. You'll be able to tell if the lid is sealed, if you can lift up on the lid and it stays secure on the top of it. So go ahead and put your mark on here. This is the date that these were made. And that way you know you've got them, and you'll have these on your can shelf for a while. Once you've determined that the seal is good, if you find one that's not sealed, that's not a bad thing. You just take that jar, put the ring back on it, and you can put it in the refrigerator and you can eat that one right now. But don't put that on the can shelf if it's not sealed. If you pull up on it and the lid is not attached to it, definitely eat that one now. Don't put that on the can shelf. That is not sealed. It won't be safe for you to eat if it sits on the can shelf. So put it in the refrigerator, eat it, and enjoy it right now. If you determine that all of your lids are sealed after the 24-hour period, take your rings off of them. You're going to store them on your can shelf like this with just the lid on it. That way, if for some reason the lid becomes detached from the jar, if you've still got the ring on it, it might have enough pressure on it that it would push down on the lid and reseal it. And at that point, you might have bacteria in there. You might put mold in there. You definitely don't want to take a chance with that. You want it to be secure and sealed. Do not store your food on the can shelf with the rings on them. Take those off. And that way you've got a guaranteed seal on those. So enjoy these. I know you're going to love this recipe. Let's give this a taste test. This is what I had left over here. This looks really nice. I've got the consistency. I can see the cinnamon in there. I've got a few chunks in there that I still like those. Let's try this and see what this tastes like. It has that right amount of sugar in there for that sweetness, and that cinnamon is just bringing out that extra little notes of those pears. This is absolutely delicious. I know you're going to love this recipe. This would make a great gift. These processed jars, you made it yourself. Give it a try. I know you're going to love it. If you've never canned before, definitely leave me a comment in the comment section. I want to hear how yours turned out. And if you've made pear sauce before and you did anything different, leave me a comment. I'd love to hear from you on what you do different. If you like this content, maybe you might consider giving me a thumbs up. I would really appreciate it. And while you're at it, maybe you might want to check out one of these other 2 videos over here on the side. You might find something else you like. Don't forget to like, share, and subscribe. Try this pear sauce. I know you're going to love this recipe. And I'll see you in my next video. Bye-bye now.